Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to try to get to the bottom of Hasbulla Magomedov.
Hasbulla Magomedov.
Is he a visionary, or is he just really good at making things go viral?
Well, that's a question that applies to a lot of people who sort of capture that zeitgeist. Are they really changing the world, or are they just capitalizing on a moment in time for personal gain? With Hasbulla, it's especially tricky because of how he blends charisma and controversy and, of course, his unique circumstances.
Yeah, he's 21 years old from Dagestan, Russia,
Mm-hmm.
and he has growth hormone deficiency, or GHD, and a lot of people mistake that for dwarfism,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually a different condition that affects his growth.
Right.
And you've probably seen him all over social media, hanging out with UFC stars,
Yeah.
posing with luxury cars, all of that.
Yeah, he's become this global phenomenon, and I think that's part of what makes him so fascinating as a case study, because he's turned something that, in many ways could have been limiting into a source of global recognition.
Totally. Okay, so let's rewind a bit and trace his rise to fame.
Okay.
I mean, it all started with those TikToks, right?
Yeah.
Mimicking the MMA fighters, and especially Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how a lot of people were first introduced to him.
Those early videos, I think, were so key because they were short, they were funny, they were attention-grabbing, perfectly suited for a platform like TikTok.
Mhm.
And if you think about the timing, this was all happening during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic when, much of the world was stuck at home, craving distraction, lighthearted content. And his videos provided exactly that.
Yeah, and it's not just that he went viral, but like he was smart about it.
Okay.
He really capitalized on that momentum. I mean, you remember the whole pizza thing?
Yeah.
Just a video of him eating pizza, but it blew up.
Cool up.
And then, he was smart. He turned it into merch and stickers and those cardboard cutouts you see everywhere.
That's a classic example of understanding how meme culture works. He took something simple and relatable, turned it into something shareable, and then, he was smart. He capitalized on that momentum. It's a strategy that we've seen time and time again with other successful internet personalities,
Yeah.
Grumpy Cat or Doge. These figures become symbols that people want to own, they want to wear, they want to be a part of.
That's like he almost hacked the algorithm of fame.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, and he did it so early on. But there's also this whole breaking free narrative.
Mm.
He's talked about how he felt like school was prison for him, and he actually escaped. He convinced a friend to drive like 200 kilometers to get him away from there.
I mean, it's a fascinating turning point in his story because, this escape from a restrictive environment, the freedom of online expression, I think really speaks to a desire for autonomy, a desire to control his own narrative. And in a way, the internet gave him that, platform to create, to connect, to build a world on his own terms.
So you've got this kid who went from feeling trapped to commanding, millions of followers,
Right.
posing with a $7,500 Rolex 1 minute and then talking about his Muslim faith the next.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of contrasts.
And I think that's what makes him so intriguing. He
Yeah.
embodies this tension between tradition and modernity, between piety and a very public embrace of material wealth. And that's a tension that really resonates in our culture as well.
Yeah.
We're fascinated by figures who blur those lines.
Yeah, and then there's the whole financial side of it.
Oh, yeah.
He launches his own cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that everyone just jumps into.
No, it takes a certain level of, awareness of market trends and a willingness to take risks. Now, whether this is genuine business acumen or, part of a carefully crafted persona is debatable, but it definitely adds yet another layer to his image. The savvy entrepreneur, the internet hustler who's always kind of one step ahead of the game.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this persona, because it seems like it's at the heart of the whole visionary versus opportunist question.
Absolutely. I mean, we're really diving into the psychology of image here.
Yeah.
Is he presenting an authentic version of himself, or is it a calculated performance designed to maximize his appeal and, ultimately his profits? Yeah, it's like we're trying to decode some sort of performance art piece.
Right.
But the stage is social media, and the stakes are, real money and global influence.
Yeah, and the audience is loving it. But let's talk about some of the controversial parts of that performance,
Okay.
because I feel like that's where it gets really murky.
Yeah.
We've talked about the expensive tastes and the business ventures.
Right.
But then there's this softer side that he presents, the love for animals, the connection to his faith.
Yeah, I mean, it's a smart strategy. It adds dimension to his persona.
Yeah.
It makes him more relatable, maybe even vulnerable. Think about all those videos of him cuddling with cats and birds. It creates this counterpoint to the more brash, almost aggressive persona he often projects.
But then there's the incident with his cat, Barsic.
Yeah.
The video of him hitting and pulling the cat's ear.
Right.
I mean, that sparked a lot of backlash.
It did.
Does that contradict the animal lover image?
It certainly complicates it, and it raises questions about authenticity. Is it a blind spot? Is it just a momentary lapse in judgment? Or is it, a reminder that even with these carefully curated online personas, real-life behavior can be messy and inconsistent?
Yeah.
And I think we can't ignore those inconsistencies, when we try to assess, someone's true character.
Right. It's like you can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. At some point, the mask slips.
Yeah. And I think, the more closely we examine Hasbulla's actions, the more these inconsistencies sort of emerge. We see the devout Muslim who frequently discusses his faith, but we also see the young man who flaunts luxury goods and, engages in what some might consider questionable behavior.
It's that clash between piety and extravagance that I can't get past.
Right.
Is it genuine devotion alongside worldly ambition, or is he just using faith as another element of a carefully constructed image?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what keeps people hooked. We're drawn to the enigma, to the person who defies easy categorization.
It's interesting to compare him to other controversial figures in history.
Yeah.
Like P.T. Barnum.
Yeah.
Showman extraordinaire.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a master at captivating the public, but a lot of his methods were exploitative, even cruel.
Right.
Is there a parallel there?
Yeah, I think it's a valid comparison.
Yeah.
P.T. Barnum understood the power of spectacle, how to tap into our desire for novelty and entertainment. And he blurred the lines between reality and fantasy, and he made a fortune doing it. But he also, left behind this legacy of ethical questions. Did he exploit people for his own gain? Was he a visionary or a con artist? And I think like with Hasbulla, the answer is probably somewhere in between.
Yeah, and that's what makes these figures so fascinating, but also so difficult to really assess. Are they driven by this genuine desire to entertain, to kind of push boundaries, to create something new? Or are they just masters of manipulation, using their charisma and savvy to amass wealth and power?
Right. It's a question that goes back centuries. Think about the alchemists of old, promising to turn lead into gold.
Right.
Were they true believers or were they just skilled deceivers? The line between the visionary and the charlatan, between the innovator and the exploiter, is often razor thin.
And it seems like that line is even more blurred now in the age of social media.
Absolutely.
Where anyone can become a global sensation overnight.
Yeah, the tools of self-promotion and image creation are more readily available now than ever before. So it really begs the question, how do we separate the genuine from the manufactured? The authentic from the calculated? It's a challenge that we as consumers of this content have to grapple with constantly.
So where does all this leave us with Hasbulla?
Yeah.
We've analyzed his rise to fame. We've kind of dissected his persona. We've explored all these contradictions. Are we any closer to answering that question? Visionary or opportunist?
I think we're closer to understanding the complexity of the question itself. Hasbulla is a product of his time. He's a master of the internet age. And I think he's a reflection of our own fascination with fame and fortune, and this increasingly blurred line between reality and performance.
Okay, but there's one piece of the puzzle that we haven't really talked about yet.
Okay.
And I think it might give us some more clues about his motivations and ultimately his legacy.
Okay.
And that's his deep connection to the world of MMA.
Yeah, and it's a connection that goes way beyond fandom. We're talking about a strategic alliance with one of the most powerful organizations in the world, the UFC.
Okay, so we talked about how he's internet savvy, business-minded.
Right.
Maybe a bit of a provocateur even.
Yeah.
But let's talk about his love of MMA, because this seems to be like where a lot of his passion, real or perceived, really comes out.
Well, his connection to MMA, I think, is strategic, no doubt, but it also seems very personal.
Yeah.
It allows him to tap into this global community, to align himself with powerful figures like Khabib or Magomedov, and to really present himself as, this unlikely warrior, this symbol of defying limitations.
Yeah, he really leans into that mini Khabib persona.
He does.
Remember that photo of him wearing Conor McGregor's, signature Papaha hat?
Oh, yeah.
And then the caption was, Me, when anyone tries to talk shit about Khabib.
Yeah, that's a classic example of using humor and a bit of bravado to really embed himself in the MMA narrative.
Yeah.
He's not just a fan, he's making himself a character in this ongoing drama of the sport.
And people love it.
Yeah.
And then there was that whole thing with the proposed fight against Abdurozak,
Right.
another social media personality with GHD.
Mm-hmm.
It ultimately got shut down, for ethical reasons.
Of course.
But the amount of hype it generated was insane.
Right. And that's where the line between genuine passion and calculated spectacle gets really, really blurry. Did he truly want to fight, or was it all about, generating buzz and keeping his name in the headlines? It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, I can see both sides of it. And on one hand, he's this huge MMA fan.
Mm-hmm.
He trains, he clearly enjoys that competitive aspect. But on the other hand, he's also incredibly savvy when it comes to, promoting himself and building his brand.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the 5-year contract he signed with the UFC in 2022.
Right.
Still shrouded in a bit of mystery.
Yeah.
But it says a lot about his ability to leverage his fame and turn it into a lucrative partnership with a major organization.
What do you think's going on behind the scenes with that deal? Is he just doing like appearances, or is there something more to it?
Well, there's been speculation about everything from coaching to commentating to even potentially fighting in an exhibition match.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it would be controversial, no doubt, but the UFC is certainly no stranger to controversy.
True.
And, let's be honest, it would be a massive financial win for them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be fascinating to see how they'd handle the ethics of it all.
Yeah.
Would it be exploitative? Would it set some kind of dangerous precedent? Or would it be seen as celebrating his determination and, his ability to defy expectations?
It's a slippery slope, and it would definitely spark debate.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of what makes the Hasbulla phenomenon so interesting. He forces us to really confront our own biases, our own assumptions about what's acceptable and what's not.
He's forcing us to ask some hard questions about fame, about exploitation, about the line between entertainment and something more.
Right. And in a world where the lines between reality and performance are becoming more and more blurred, those questions are more relevant than ever.
So where do we land on this whole thing? Visionary or opportunist?
Yeah.
Is he a genuine force for change? Or is he just really, really good at playing the game?
I don't think there's an easy answer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe he's a flawed individual who's also incredibly gifted, who's figured out how to use his unique circumstances to build a platform to entertain millions of people and to make a pretty good living in the process.
And maybe that's enough.
Maybe.
Maybe we don't need to define him.
Yeah.
Put him in a box, label him as one thing or the other.
Yeah.
Maybe the real lesson here is that authenticity is complex.
Yeah.
Especially in a world of curated personas and manufactured virality.
It's a constantly evolving concept.
Yeah, Hasbulla is a product of his time.
Yeah.
He's a master of this internet age, and he's a reflection of our own desires for connection and entertainment, and maybe even a little chaos.
He's a walking, talking enigma, and whether you love him, hate him, or just can't figure him out, he's impossible to ignore. And that in itself is a kind of genius.
That's our deep dive into the world of Hasbulla Magomedov.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed it. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next dive.